Welcome to the session, our breakout session on advancing local government and regional cybersecurity at scale. I'm very pleased to have with me here Allison Yakabi, of the lead analyst of the Northern California Regional Intelligence Center, which will tell us more about shortly, and George Thomas, Vice President of Innovation and Strategic Initiatives for the Connected DMV. I'm Lee McKnight, a professor at Syracuse University, and have been involved in NIST, GCTC, and related initiatives with Cyber Trust America and Smart Security and Privacy. So very pleased to have you all with us. Without further ado, and I thought I'd start by turning tables rather than using my chair's prerogative and pontificating for a long time, I want to start off with the real experts in the room, virtual room, which are our two colleagues here. Allison, could you tell us a little bit about how you and your organization address and participate in regional cybersecurity initiatives already, and some of your thoughts for the future?
Sure. Thanks, Lee. I'm a cyber intel analyst at the Northern California Regional Intelligence Center, which is a fusion center in Northern California. We're in San Francisco. We're one of 80 across the country, stood up after 9/11 to mitigate terrorist threats. And probably around 2014, we started to see a shift where cyber criminals, cyber threat actors started engaging with terrorist ideology. So now we work cyber crimes, we work cyber threats, cyber terrorist indicators. And what we do is our best partners are law enforcement already. We work well with them to share suspicious activity reporting. So now we provide that advisory and consulting level service where if they're seeing cyber incidents or cyber indicators that might match up with what our federal partners are seeking to identify, we can pass those cases. So that's a really good pipeline for us, is building cases for our federal partners. And also anytime local law enforcement or a municipality, because really it's city and county IT that's responsible for law enforcement networks. So we're trying to protect those as well. So we provide an advisory capacity where they don't have CISOs. A lot of city and county governments are still getting there. And so when they have suspicious emails come in, we have a phishing inbox. We'll run those out. We're a bunch of analysts, so we sit in our chairs trying to fight crime and fight terrorism with our brains. So that's
Great.
The gist.
Thanks. So just one more clarification, which is you note that you were stood up after 9/11. Your funding comes from Department of Homeland Security or state or both sources or multiple sources?
Correct. The State Homeland Security Grant Program. We're grant funded.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, and George, could you similarly say something about Connected DMV and your roles there?
Sure. Thank you, Lee. So Connected DMV is a public-private academia, not-for-profit that was stood up in the greater Washington region, the DMV standing for DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And the basic purpose for us standing up is because we are the national capital region, and because we are split between two states, the district, and co-located with the federal government, there is a lot of constraints and a lot of gaps in getting things done quickly, fast, and at scale. And so we were stood up as being the regional kind of glue. We were stood up primarily by the 24 local jurisdictions, cities, counties in the region, to see what we could do to forward the progress on a number of key big strategic issues, one of which happens to be cybersecurity. So from a cybersecurity perspective, similar to Allison, we have 4 fusion centers in the region. We have a number of CISA, federal, NSF, other organizations that are all based here. Coordination among them is difficult and spotty within the kind of rules that there are. So one of the big cybersecurity initiatives that we kind of focused in on, were asked to lead, is what we're calling our collective cyber defense umbrella, which essentially looking at the mid-tier of societal infrastructure. If you think about schools, hospitals, small banks, they are terribly unprotected. The bigger institutions in our region are well protected. There's enough threat intelligence coming in, enough analysts looking at the stuff. So what we, over the last couple of years, have been trying to do is figure out how to stand up a cybersecurity umbrella for that middle tier that's supported by the bigs in the region across public and private, to provide better protection. And again, because we are the NCR, we get attacked a lot. on a regular basis, and the impacts of that, even if it is at a school district, is felt by everybody in the region because all our kids go to the same school. So how do we protect that societal infrastructure is a good part of the mission on what Connected DMV does, and specifically the Cyber Defense Umbrella Initiative.
Okay, so if I can just again elaborate too. So you do have the fusion centers similar to where Allison is, but multiple ones across jurisdictions, which were leaving gaps. When were you established?
So Connected DMV, we have been around as an initiative for about 4.5 years. We were legally established as a standalone not-for-profit in 2020, early 2020, just before COVID-19 actually hit.
Okay, and the funding sources?
Regional organizations, states, some grants. It's a mixed bag of sponsorships because we are a not-for-profit. It tends to be kind of spread between public, private, some philanthropy, and academia.
Great, thanks. Okay, so I'll just say a brief word about like how did Professor McKnight get in the middle of the two of you professionals. And so since 2018, working with Alon and Cyber Trust, what's now Cyber Trust America, I led an action cluster on secure cloud architecture, essentially looking at what's the gaps, what's needed for helping cities, smart cities and communities beyond putting out fires and dealing with like the immediate threats. Is there some kind of reconceptualization or change in approach that could help reduce the level of threat actors penetrating multiple organizations? So since then, we've completed a document on this, submitted as an action cluster report on secure cloud architecture for smart cities and regions. And I'll pop the link into the chat window when I'm not talking. And my big win is to get the phrase secure cloud architecture recognized as a quote unquote key consideration for smart cities, which it hadn't been before. Well, of course, in the private sector where you all are, or either in Washington or Silicon Valley, of course, people in the private sector know well how important managing cloud security is, but it's a new topic or issue for like a mayor or even city CISO officials. I'll say one more thing that was announced earlier today. We're launching a short course here at Syracuse University on leading smart cities with trust, which will be offered for the first time next summer, or next spring, that is. So I'm not doing a commercial for that now, but just thinking about securing regions and one community or a region. I've been nudging people in New York State to try to do this, but perhaps unsurprisingly, where Allison is moving a little faster, and we're working on a project with Cyber Trust America right now, and the city of San Francisco, Silicon Valley region, San Jose, Oakland, and surrounding counties to explore a sort of regional governance model for cybersecurity, perhaps potentially adding in additional virtual security operations center for the region, for the local city officials in some kind of governance model. So getting to governance models there, while Allison's on federal dollars, George is scrambling across grants and all kinds of money. And right now the question is, how could, if there's a big target on the back of everybody in Silicon Valley in a way for obvious reasons in this whole space. So is there some way to band together somewhat and share costs, share resources, and do risk assessment? Not that Allison's not doing a great job, but I guess I'll stop and say, Allison, like from your point of view, is there a way for your entity, or to sort of expand scope and scale into additional services, or are you sort of bound to stay within your lane going forward?
As with George, we're also very creative. So we've worked with nonprofits, we've worked with the state, other agencies in our area. We're trying to promote automated indicator sharing. That's the holy grail, because you can have a small team, such as mine, ingesting a bunch of different threat feeds, and then being able to farm those out, triage, and pass them up, escalate accordingly. So that's really the goal, is to have a regional information sharing center that's more automated rather than email or phone based.
Okay. And same question to you, George. Are you now comfortable that connected deviant is the city, the Washington, now safe and secure thanks to you and your entity, or is there more needed?
No, not even close. I mean, the threat levels, the threat types constantly change. We did 2 workshops earlier this year. One with primarily banks, K through 12 institutions, some hospitals, the big ones across the region, all in the same room. We are talking CIOs, CISOs in the room, trying to figure out what the big stopgaps were. And the big thing, single biggest thing actually that came up of all of those discussions is not enough hands and legs and not enough people to interpret what's coming in, and not enough coordination when something comes in on sharing that to let others know. And this is not a it's a combination of private sector, private companies not wanting to show vulnerabilities, public sector not being able to coordinate well enough, the public private institutions like the schools not having the right skill levels of resources. It's a combination of all of that, but what it really comes down to is there's from that group of 60 organizations roughly, was there's a lot of data, a lot of information. We don't have the time or the bandwidth to do anything much with it, and when we do it, it's not fast enough. So the AI thing that Alison was talking about, that is really the holy grail. Figuring out what to touch, what to do, how quickly, what is important. That is really the second part that we are really focused on and trying to build out is, could we create shared services for some of the stuff that these societal infrastructure agencies really struggle with? And the analogy that we've always used is, if we assume tomorrow Canada declares war on us and somebody starts lobbing missiles at the greater Washington region from across in Toronto, we're not expecting every school district or every hospital or every small bank to have its own missile defense shield. It would be done for them by the larger region. Just because it's digital doesn't mean that the same level of focus from a regional perspective shouldn't be there. An individual organization should not be held accountable. So how do we kind of band together to do that? Now, lots and lots and lots of constraints, from policy to regulations to where the funding comes from, etc. But from a collaboration perspective, our real ambition is to build ourselves towards having this collective cyber defense capability, both from a risk assessment perspective, from a reaction perspective, and a post event, what do we do better next time perspective, across all three kind of functions, as it were, is really our ambition.
Great. And so circling back around one more time, Alison, again, you're part of a successful program that's moving forward with, so are you developing tools in-house, or are you partnering with industry with existing AI, cybersecurity, threat detection, latest toys, and what's your approach there?
So we accept recommendations for latest toys, but really our strength is in trust. We've been in this space almost 9 years now in the region. So in our 15 counties in Northern California, we have trust in that people are willing to share information with us. They know that we'll protect it. And so we started with cyber mutual aid, which is person to person. If you have an agency that has an extra person who's an expert in Active Directory, maybe you can come respond to this Ryuk infection at another city. So trying to use those existing emergency management compacts that work well for law enforcement, for hazmat, and seeing if we can replicate that through incident command system for cyber and IT.
Great. Circling from back to George, you're sitting there in the Capitol, and people in the Capitol often tell the rest of the country what to do. So right, it's true. So is Connected DMV a model? Is it a one-off entity because of the significance and range of threats to your region? How do you see your own organization?
Oh, I definitely don't think we are a model. I mean, we are learning every day from other regions. So, like I said, we have 4 fusion centers. The Commonwealth of Virginia has a very deep bench when it comes to cybersecurity because of the data centers and everything else. There's an institution within the Commonwealth called the CCI, the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative, which provides a lot of funding and a lot of research assets into the region to do it. So what we are really trying to do is, we have an NSF has centers here. Everybody has something here. CISA is really big in the region. I think our bigger problem is anybody that's big and large, public, private academia seems to be reasonably well protected. The bench of resources, the bench of tools, ability to coordinate. Where it kind of falls down is the moment you step off that big and go into the medium, is really the skills kind of become harder to get and retain because there are higher paying jobs out there. The types of roles that they have to provide, even if you have the skills, become very difficult. So that's really been our focus. Is we have so much talent and capability in the region. Could we optimize it in some way to provide better coverage across the board, versus the folks who have the luxury of figuring out what that coverage should be? So the strongest kind of institutions are getting stronger on a daily basis, but others are getting left behind. That's really been our kind of focus, is to bridge that gap. And because again we have a wealth of assets and resources in the region, sometimes that's a negative thing. There's so much of it that nobody knows what to do or who to call, and that's been part of the thing that we have been trying to navigate our way through. And we are doing this with public and private, right? So we are talking to banks, we're talking to healthcare institutions. That adds two layers of complexity. One, it adds a layer of complexity from an industry perspective. What's required for healthcare and the rules and regulations are very different than energy, very different than K through 12, and who can access what levels do you need. So that's an industry flavor that has to be taken into account. And the second flair is very unique to us, is the rules in Virginia and Maryland and DC are different. Just the policies are different. So you have to account for that before you can share things. So that's really been our focus, is to try to thread all those needles to craft something that's practical in the near term, but that can be built towards something a little bit more measured in the longer term, that perhaps after it's all said and done, Lee, in a couple of years or so, could be a model for other regions. But we are just working our way to it.
Okay, well, we'll turn to Allison. So are you a model then? You've been at this for twice as long as George, you're saying, and building trust in the region. As I mentioned, there's another study going on with led by Cyber Trust America, looking at setting up virtual security operations centers for the counties and states. So is that like a service that you guys could be offering instead, in competition with Cyber Trust America, or instead, or as a shared service facilitated? How do you see things going forward?
I see there's plenty of work for everyone. So in terms of seeing ourselves as a model, we look to New York, we look to LA, that have more regional collaboration going on. Yeah. They also have different demographics, different county divisions. So I learn from everyone, and it's going to keep going.
Okay, well, so I'll just comment there quickly. Obviously, in terms of after 9/11, New York City Cyber Command has the resources and the scale for the city and the region. But just going north to Westchester County, where the city of Potsdam was hit by a ransomware attack that's literally shut the whole city down and the school systems down. Just last month, I was being interviewed by the media and saying, yeah, okay, what did Westchester County do? That's outside of, it's not Cyber Command's problem if it's up in wealthy Westchester, right? But if it's not even Westchester County's problem, if a city in the county is hit, and it's just like the local cities have left to deal with this by itself, just which is how it really looks like. So think about, if you're a small city in Westchester and you're not getting help or support regionally, that's not a good model. And now we go to many other parts of the country that don't even have like a cyber command within 50 miles or anything like that, where there could have been some shared resources coming over. So I certainly agree that there's more to be done and plenty of work all around. But standing, and my advocacy was where I'll get back on the soapbox, is regional. If you're not going to get every little city and town or school board ever getting the skilled talent like George was just mentioning, or being able to afford folks like Allison either. So it has, the only way that it's ever going to get any protection at all is going to be on some kind of regional basis. George, you have, so one question came in about cyber militias. I think that could have been targeted towards Allison with her DHS ties, but I don't know if that's really the right, or being a little facetious. But George, you have a question about examples of, or maybe that's for you, Allison, too, about examples of cyber mutual aid agreements. Are there standard agreements that you have in place with counties, or is everyone a one-off?
So I can refer you to two. There's the California Emergency Management Mutual Aid Compact. That's the basis of what we're developing. And then also the NCRIC Information Sharing MOU. So adapting that for cyber indicators. And they're both still with our attorney's office trying to get approved to be shared out. And I would advise anyone listening that an MOU might not be the way to go. It's a little more complex. Even a JPA, if you can agree to information sharing at the lowest level, that would solve a lot of problems.
Okay. And George, there's a question about you. Why did you go with a 501c3 governance model instead of an MOU?
So Connected DMV is not just doing cybersecurity. It's one of 13 kind of regional missions we've been asked to kind of participate in. Cyber just happens to be one. So each of these missions are very, very different. Like one of the big ones that we're doing is we have launched a pandemic defense center here in the region to look at the next 100 pathogens after COVID-19 and what the structure should that look like. So they're all different industries, different sectors, but big regional efforts that would need to come to place. So from a cyber perspective, I think MOUs, agreements between the four fusion centers with NSF, there are multiple single-threaded conversations that have happened. A part of kind of our look ahead is once you leave those federally funded structures, it gets very loose and very complicated with regard to where the money comes from and what you need to do. So within our region, we have 24 cities, counties that I mentioned. So there is a CIO CISO community that meets on a regular basis. We have a council of governments that operates and manages that. So that council gets together on a regular basis to figure out what it is. So there's agreements and trust built up over 20, 30 years that group has been kind of working together, and they all know each other and grew up together. So there is that. But the moment you leave that core government community and you're trying to touch healthcare, there's another circle of trust you need to get into. When you do the K through 12, it's another circle of trust. When you reach the banking community, it's another circle of trust. That's really where some of these problems happen, because a bank might get hit in Fairfax County. Right then, the school district might get hit in Fairfax County. But there's very limited communication between the bank in Fairfax County and the school district in Fairfax County. Right. So that's where a lot of these kind of issues come up and things cascade. And sometimes the bank gets hit and they don't want to tell anybody they got hit because of all kinds of reasons. And then you never know. And so that's really where this gets really, really complicated in trying to figure out. So there's a network of, as Alison mentioned, agreements, MOUs, past history, trust documents, information sharing compacts that are all in place, but they all tend to be set up from a peer-to-peer perspective for certain occasions that have become kind of like this mass of documents you need to wade your way through. There's nothing that's network-wide, which is, again, may never happen, but the real ambition is how do you make that a little easier, the stepping stool to get into those networks a little easier for the mid-sized organization.
But turning back to Alison, again, we're talking about local governments, regional cybersecurity at scale. Do you have some advice for our viewers for what they might do, or like what mistakes to avoid? Either one or both are welcome.
Okay, so first of all, trusting that when you're reporting an incident, wherever it's going, that your information is being anonymized. No one's looking to name and shame you as a victim. They can name your sector, if it's banking sector, education sector, but no one really cares who that entity is unless they're building a case. Secondly, in terms of preparation, in the over 100 incidents I've worked in the past 4 years, I would say the biggest one is not knowing who your cyber insurer is, what they actually cover, and being able to contact them on the weekends.
Okay, so that's I wasn't expecting that one. Like cyber insurance on the weekend is a big issue. Okay, I'll just note that this is something where it definitely feels like every regions, there's a particular range of threats that Washington D.C. area has. Obviously, Silicon Valley, Northern California, where you're operating, has plenty of hugely significant economic and business resources, as well as government resources, all there in concentration. So from our work up to this point with LAN and Cyber Trust America, there's one argument against aggregating this threat intelligence at even a higher level, which is, you know what, then now there's even bigger target on your back. So I'm not sure, Allison, like how paranoid you are about showing your face, but you're showing your face and name right here amongst us, which we appreciate. But is there an argument to try to keep this localized to reduce, like, is there still a security through security through obscurity argument at these things, or does it make sense to recognize we need, or to feel like we need to scale up? What's your views?
I think that it's the aggregation of information is so piecemeal that the threat actor wouldn't be targeting us for any additional value than they would to target an individual company. Like, we might have a K through 12, we might have a retail operation, that a threat actor would be much more interested in Bank of America. So.
Okay, then George, you get the final word here now that you fortunately got back. So, like, what words of advice do you have for you insist you're not a model, so you still get to give the closing words of advice for other regions. Like, what should they be what should be their first concern? Should they be trying to replicate working at scale, or trying to do things at a more local level?
I think the single biggest constraint is time to act, because the opposition, if you want to use that term, is state-sponsored or well-organized criminal networks. Small-scale piecemeal many times is all we are offering in return. So any opportunity we have to create scale by sharing information, by using technology like AI, by sharing resources, however you do that, I think that would be the stepping stones to build larger and larger collaborations as we grow forward and do it. And if you talk to any of the big institutions in whatever region you're from, even if you're a private sector entity, everybody wants to help, because if the K through 12 gets hit, everybody's kids get hit, you have to take time off. So it is personal, not just professional from that perspective. So the impact is societal. So everybody's there to help. It's figuring out those networks to ask for help and the right avenues to go do about it. That's sometimes people and organizations don't do, but I think we should be a little bit more open and try to do more of.
Okay, well, that's a great final word. We're 1 minute over time. Thanks so much, Allison. Thanks so much, George. Thank you all for joining us on this session, and we'll let folks get on to the next segment of the program. Thanks again.
Thank you, Professor Lee. Thank you.